My aunt and uncle tried to have me declared an unfit guardian for my sister after they promised my parents they would always be there for us. Hi, Reddit. I never thought I'd be posting here, but my life has become a nightmare, and I need to know if I'm losing my mind. My friends are divided, and I'm starting to question my own judgment. It all started 2 years ago when my world fell apart. My parents were on a weekend trip to the coast when their car was hit by a truck driver who fell asleep at the wheel. They died instantly. I was 24, just starting to find my footing after college. My younger sister, Hannah, was 19. Hannah has cerebral palsy. She's the sweetest person you could ever meet, but she needs constant care. She uses a powered wheelchair, needs help with all her daily living activities. Bathing, dressing, eating. And while she's incredibly bright, her speech can be difficult to understand for those who don't know her well. She will always need a guardian. I became that guardian. There was no one else. Our grandparents are gone, and my parents were both only children. I had to grow up overnight. I was working an entry-level marketing job, but I had to quit because the hours were too rigid and I couldn't manage Hannah's care schedule. We had to move out of our parents' rented house. There was no life insurance, and their savings were wiped out by medical bills from Hannah's childhood surgeries. We found a small, accessible apartment in a less-than-ideal part of the city. It was all we could afford. To make ends meet, I worked 2 jobs. During the day, I'm a receptionist at a dental clinic. The pay is low, but it's steady. At night, I deliver food for a local restaurant chain. I'm on the road from 6 p.m. to sometimes 1 a.m. I'm always tired. Hannah gets a government disability stipend, but it barely covers her specialized medical supplies. We qualify for a home care aide who comes for 3 hours, 3 times a week. The rest of the time, Hannah is alone. She has a communication device in her tablet, and I have cameras set up so I can check on her and talk to her, but I know she's lonely. The guilt is a physical weight on my chest every single day. Enter my Aunt Linda and my Uncle David. They were my mother's best friends since college. Not blood relatives, but closer than any family could be. Hannah's godparents. I have a memory, burned into my brain, of them sitting at our kitchen table a year or so before the accident. My mom was worried about the future, as she often was. David put his hand on hers and said, "You listen to me, Maria. If anything ever happens to you, we will be there for those girls. Hannah will never want for anything. We promise you." Linda had nodded, her eyes full of tears, and hugged my mom. I believed them. I think my parents died with that belief giving them some peace. After the funeral, they were present. They helped with the paperwork, brought us casseroles, called to check in. But as the months wore on, the calls became less frequent. The visits stopped. They lived about 45 minutes away in a beautiful, spacious suburban house. David was a successful accountant, and Linda was a real estate agent. Their own kids were grown and lived out of state. They had the time. They had the space. They had the resources. The breaking point came 2 months ago. Hannah's powered wheelchair needed a new motor. The cost was astronomical, more than I made in 2 months at both jobs combined. I was staring at the bills, my bank account balance a pitiful number in red, and I felt a panic attack coming on. I remembered David's promise. I remembered the conviction in his voice. I thought this is what they meant. This is anything they promised to help with. I called Linda. I asked if I could come over to talk. She sounded hesitant, but agreed. I got a neighbor to sit with Hannah for a few hours and drove to their perfect house in the suburbs. They greeted me politely, but there was a stiffness in the air. We sat in their pristine living room, and I laid it all out. I wasn't dramatic. I was factual. I explained the cost of the wheelchair motor, the rising rent, my exhausting work schedule, My fear that Hannah wasn't getting the social interaction she needed. I was clear and, I thought, respectful. Then I asked. I said, I know this is a big thing to ask, but you told my parents you would help. Could you possibly contribute even a small amount, maybe $100 or $200 a month, just to help with Hannah's extra costs? Or, if not money, could one of you maybe spend one afternoon a week with her? It would mean the world to her, and it would give me a chance to breathe or pick up an extra shift. The silence that followed was deafening. Linda and David exchanged a look I couldn't quite decipher. Then Linda spoke, her voice cold. Jessica, I think it's important you learn to stand on your own 2 feet. Your mother would have wanted you to be independent. Coming here and throwing promises made in a moment of grief in our faces feels very manipulative. I was stunned. It was like she'd slapped me. Manipulative? I'm drowning. I'm just asking for a lifeline. You promised. David chimed in, not meeting my eyes. We have our own financial planning to think about, Jessica. Retirement isn't cheap. We helped you after the funeral. We did what we could. What you could. I felt my face flush with heat. Hannah is your goddaughter. She asks about you. She misses you. What about your promise to her? Linda stood up, her face tight with anger. Don't you dare use Hannah to guilt-trip us. She is your responsibility, not ours. We have sympathy, but you're a smart girl. You need to budget better or find a higher-paying job. Maybe you're just not trying hard enough. That was the final straw. I stood up, my hands trembling. Not trying hard enough? I work 2 jobs. I haven't had a full night's sleep in 2 years. I haven't been on a date. I haven't seen my friends. My entire life is work and caring for my sister. How dare you? I think you should leave, Linda said, pointing to the door. You are being incredibly disrespectful in our home. Fine, I said, my voice shaking. I see now. Your promise wasn't worth anything. I walked out, got in my car, and sobbed, great heaving sobs of rage and humiliation. I didn't tell Hannah what happened. I just hugged her extra tight when I got home. For 2 weeks, there was nothing. I managed to get a small, high-interest loan to cover the wheelchair repair. I was even more exhausted, more desperate. My friends were split. One said I was right to call them out on their hypocrisy. Another said I had been too aggressive and should have approached them with more humility, that I'd burned a bridge. Then the war began. Thank you for the overwhelming support on my first post. Most of you said I was NTA, which was a relief to hear. Some of you gave great advice about looking into nonprofits and advocacy groups, and I've started that process, though it's slow. About a week after I posted, I was at my receptionist job. The bell on the door chimed, and in walked Linda. My blood ran cold. She walked right up to my desk. There were patients in the waiting room. Hello, Jessica, she said, her voice syrupy sweet, but with an edge. Linda, I'm at work. Can this wait? Oh, I just think it's so sad, she said, raising her voice slightly. A young girl like you, having to work a job like this. It must be so hard, not being able to provide properly for your sister. We're just so worried about Hannah. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. Linda, please. Not here. Why not? Is the truth too embarrassing? That you can't manage? That you came to us begging for money because you're in over your head? Her voice was getting louder. Your mother would be heartbroken to see this. My face was burning. The dentist, Dr. Evans, came out as operatory, hearing the commotion. Is everything all right, Jessica? Before I could speak, Linda turned to him. I'm just so concerned about her poor, disabled sister. I'm her godmother. We're just trying to help, but she's so proud. Linda, leave now, or I will call the police, I said, my voice low and steady despite my shaking hands. She gave a theatrical sigh, shook her head at Dr. Evans as if to say, "See what I have to deal with," and walked out. Dr. Evans gave me a concerned look, but didn't press me. I was mortified. That evening, David called. His tone was calm, condescending. "Jessica, Linda was very upset by your confrontation at your workplace." "My confrontation?" "She came to my job. She's just concerned. And we've heard from a friend that you've been sharing your version of events online, spreading lies about us." I had been careful not to use names, but I guess the story was specific enough. "I haven't lied about anything, David. Your attitude is making it impossible for us to have a relationship with you, or Hannah. We think it's best if we take a step back. Permanently. So that's it? After everything you promised my mother? We wish Hannah the best. From a distance." And he hung up. I felt a cold dread. This wasn't just a refusal to help. This was a campaign. The quiet after David's call lasted about 10 days. I tried to focus, to push forward. Then I got the call that turned my blood to ice. It was from Mrs. Gable, Hannah's case manager from the Department of Developmental Services. "Jessica," she said, her tone formal, "I need to schedule an urgent home visit. We received an anonymous complaint regarding Hannah's welfare." My heart stopped. "What kind of complaint?" "The report alleges neglect, that Hannah is left alone for excessive periods, that her nutritional needs aren't being met, and that her living environment is unsafe." Tears sprang to my eyes. "Mrs. Gable, you know that's not true. You've been here." "I have to investigate all claims, Jessica. It's protocol. But I will say, in my professional opinion, I have not previously observed these issues. The visit is mandatory, however." I spent the next 2 days in a state of pure terror. I cleaned the apartment until it sparkled. I organized all of Hannah's medical records, her medication schedules, my work timetables. When Mrs. Gable arrived, she was all business. She inspected the apartment, checked the fridge and pantry, spoke softly with Hannah alone, and reviewed everything I gave her. After an hour, her demeanor softened. "Jessica, this is clearly a difficult situation, and you are doing an admirable job under tremendous pressure. The apartment is clean, accessible, and safe. Hannah appears healthy, well-groomed, and happy to see you. There are no signs of neglect. I will be closing this case as unfounded." I burst into tears of relief. She patted my shoulder awkwardly. "I will see if I can find any additional respite care funding. It's a long shot, but I'll try." After she left, I collapsed on the couch. There was no doubt in my mind who had made that call. Linda and David. They knew the details of my schedule. They knew I struggled. This was retaliation. This was them trying to weaponize the system against me. A few days later, I got a message from an old family friend, Mr. Henderson, who ran the local grocery store my parents used. "Jessica," dear, he wrote, "I ran into your Aunt Linda today. She was saying some concerning things. That you were struggling to cope, that you were lashing out at people trying to help, and that she was very worried she'd have to step in and take Hannah for her own good. I told her I didn't believe it for a second, but I thought you should know." My blood ran cold. They weren't just making anonymous reports. They were actively, publicly, laying the groundwork to take my sister away from me. The harassment escalated. A week after the false report, I was putting Hannah to bed when there was a furious pounding on our apartment door. Hannah flinched, her eyes wide with fear. I looked through the peephole. Linda and David were there, their faces contorted with anger. I didn't want to open it, but the pounding was so loud, I was afraid the neighbors would call the police for a noise complaint. I opened the door a crack. The chain's still on. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice trembling. "We want to see Hannah," Linda demanded, trying to peer past me. We have a right to see her. We're her godparents. You lost any rights when you called social services on me. I hissed. You need to leave. Now. David stepped forward. We're just concerned, Jessica. After that report, we felt we had to see for ourselves. The report you made. I shot back. That's a lie. Linda shrieked. She shoved against the door, the chain straining. Let us in. You're keeping her from us. You're an unfit guardian. Hannah started crying behind me, a soft, frightened sound. You're scaring her. I yelled. Linda saw Hannah then, and her voice switched to a grotesque, cooing tone. Hannah, sweetie, it's Auntie Linda. We're here to help you. Hannah shook her head violently, wheeling herself backward into the living room. That sent Linda over the edge again. See what you've done? You've turned her against us. You're a monster. I slammed the door shut and locked it, leaning against it as my whole body shook. Linda continued to scream and pound on the door for another minute before I heard David's muffled voice and the sound of them finally leaving. The next morning, I went to the police station. I filed a formal report for harassment. The officer was sympathetic and issued an informal warning to them over the phone. He told me to keep a log and that I could seek a restraining order if it continued. I thought that might be the end of it. I was wrong. A few days later, I received a letter from a law firm. My hand shook so badly I could barely open it. It was a formal letter stating that Linda and David, as concerned godparents, were initiating an inquiry into my suitability as Hannah's guardian. It cited financial instability, emotional volatility, and social isolation of the ward as their grounds. They were seeking court-ordered visitation rights and a formal review of the guardianship. They were trying to take my sister away. I went to a legal aid clinic. The lawyer there, a kind but overworked woman named Anna, read the letter. This is a scare tactic, she said. It's very difficult to remove a legal guardian without concrete evidence of abuse or neglect, which they don't have. But they can make your life a living hell. They can drag you into court, run up legal fees, and cause immense stress. We need to respond. So now, on top of everything else, I was facing a legal battle. The legal aid lawyer helped me draft a strong response to their attorney, denying all allegations and detailing their campaign of harassment, including the police report. We sent it off, and for a brief moment, I hoped it would make them back down. It did the opposite. A week later, David was waiting for me in the parking lot outside the restaurant where I deliver food. It was past midnight, and the lot was poorly lit. He stepped out from the shadows as I was walking to my car. We need to talk, Jessica. Without the lawyers, he said, his voice low and intense. I immediately started walking faster. No, we have nothing to talk about. The police have already warned you. He kept pace with me. You're destroying our family. Linda is a mess. All we ever did was care about you girls. Stay away from me. I yelled, fumbling for my keys. He reached out and grabbed my arm, his grip tight. Just listen to me. I wrenched my arm away, screaming, "Get away from me!" I scrambled into my car, locked the doors, and sped off, my heart hammering against my ribs. I called the police immediately and reported the incident. This time, they strongly encouraged me to file for that restraining order. The next day, I did. Anna helped me with the paperwork. We had a hearing for a temporary order scheduled. The stress was becoming unbearable. I was having trouble eating, and my lack of sleep was affecting my work. Hannah was regressing, becoming more withdrawn and anxious. Her therapist said she was drawing pictures of angry faces at the door. Linda left me a series of unhinged voicemails, alternating between weeping about how much she missed Hannah and screaming that I was a spiteful, cruel person who was dishonoring my mother's memory. I blocked their numbers, but the damage was done. The fear was a constant companion. My boss at the dental clinic was understanding, but my delivery job supervisor told me he didn't need drama and cut my hours. The financial noose was tightening again. This will be my last update. The hearing for the temporary restraining order was last week. I had to stand before a judge and recount every single thing. The broken promise, the public humiliation, the false report, the slander, the pounding on the door, David grabbing me in the dark parking lot. Anna was by my side, presenting the evidence, my log, the police report numbers, the threatening lawyer's letter. Linda and David were there with their lawyer. Linda cried quietly throughout my testimony, playing the part of the wounded, concerned family friend. Their lawyer argued they were just acting out of love and concern, but the facts were on my side. The judge granted the temporary restraining order for both me and Hannah. They are now legally prohibited from contacting us, coming near our home, or approaching our workplaces. The look of pure, unadulterated hatred on Linda's face as the judge spoke is something I will never forget. As we left the courtroom, she hissed, "You haven't heard the last of this," before David and their lawyer hurried her away. In the 6 weeks since the order was put in place, the direct harassment has stopped. The silence is profound, and while it's a relief, it's a fragile one. I am constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next indirect attack, the next legal maneuver. The fear doesn't just vanish. My financial situation remains a desperate daily struggle. Working 2 jobs to stay afloat is a grinding, exhausting reality. Hannah is slowly coming out of her shell, but the anxiety those 2 inflicted on her has left scars. She still sometimes asks, in her halting way, if the loud people are gone. I hold her hand and tell her yes, they are gone, and I will never, ever let anyone hurt her like that again. I look at my sister, at her resilience, and I find the strength to keep going. But I am forever changed. The act of asking for help, of reaching out for support that was so solemnly promised, didn't just result in a no. It unleashed a torrent of malice that nearly broke us. We survived it, but we are bruised, and the world feels like a much colder and more treacherous place than it did before. The bridge wasn't just burned. They tried to use its ashes to bury us, and we had to claw our way out, alone,